Good morning. It's Wednesdays. I'm Wayne. Welcome to Wednesdays with Wayne, brought to you by our friends over at Facebook, Mr. Zuckerberg, and the publishers and censors who hopefully will approve this. And it's amazing you can do all this for free. I mean, we're able to publish and have these messages sent around the world at virtually no cost. So it's incredible how much we can get done with so much less investment of time, money, and energy. So we're constantly doing more with less and more with less and more with less, to the point where we're going to end up doing everything with nothing, like I've been preaching for decades. So before we get started, the first thing I want to do is thank you for your time, as always. I do that because a friend of mine told me years ago, and I'll never forget it. He said the most valuable thing anyone can give you is their time. So I just ask you, how many of you consider your time to be valuable? Okay, thank you. How many don't like when people waste your time? Okay, good. So you have my commitment. I'll do my best in the next few minutes we have together to make sure your time is well spent. So thank you for showing up. Just to recap, this event is also being sponsored by the Real Estate Business School, where you get your license and learn to use it. What I mean by that is your license guarantees you nothing. And in order to be successful in any venture, in any business, whatever you're in, you need three types of education: technical education, business education, and financial education. And what I mean by that is there's a technical education that's required to take your courses and get a real estate license. The state licensing exam in Texas and in most states is primarily filled with technical education, a new language, math formulas, contracts. It's important to have a technical education because most of the contract disputes and lawsuits and complaints to the real estate commissions come from contract disputes. So it's because realtors sometimes don't have an understanding that they need to have of these contracts they're filling out. So that's a technical education. You have 14, 15-page contracts, addenda, and this addenda, and that addenda, and how do they work, and what do you put in the blanks, and how do you keep up with the time provisions, and all these details. And if you don't have a strong technical education, you end up getting yourself or your clients in trouble. So technical education is crucial. The problem is I've been in over 800, 900 listing transactions, near as I can guesstimate or count them all. But over the decades, I've been in sales since I was 16. I've been running a business since I was 19. I've been in thousands of business transactions, over 800 or 900. I'm looking back at my production over the years, real estate transactions. And all those listing transactions, I primarily was a listing agent. I've been on hundreds of listing presentations. No one's ever asked me the difference between accretion and erosion. I've never had a seller say, "Hey, Wayne, that was a nice presentation. Tell me before we hire you, how many cubic yards of concrete are in my driveway?" So they don't care. I mean, my wife and I own the bank millions of dollars because we invest in real estate. We got a bunch of debt. They've never asked me for my report card. So, what do your sellers want to know? If you're in real estate, you're selling a piece of property. What do your sellers want to know? Do they want to know if you're going to be able to market their property for them? And the answer is yes. Are they going to want to know if you can sell it for top dollar? Absolutely. Are they going to want you to have negotiation skills to get them top dollar? Of course. So what is the market saying to you? They're saying, "I don't care about your technical education. I want you to have a business education so you can best represent me." So we need a business education. In addition to that, we need financial education. And what I mean by that is I've known realtors work in real estate 5, 10, 15, 20 years and walk away with nothing. Spend 15, 20 years in the business, never put one property in their asset column. So what I'm suggesting, ladies and gentlemen, is that real estate is the best business in the world. And the main reason why is because insider trading is legal. And I don't mean to suggest you do anything illegal at all, ever. ever. Be clear on this. What I'm suggesting is we see information as licensees because we have access to MLS. What's in the multiple listing service? Properties for sale. Properties have expired for some reason. I don't know how a property expires in a seller's market. Usually because they're over-marketed, under-marketed, and overpriced. And the third thing that's in there, sold properties. What do sold properties tell us? Well, what we know as licensees is the definition of fair market value. What a willing buyer will pay, what a willing seller will sell for. That's fair market value. If neither one are under duress, that's fair market value. It says neither being under duress for a reason. Because when you're under duress, they sell for less. Those are in MLS. Those are the ones we're looking for. The ones we can buy for less. So what does MLS tell us? Market value. Why don't more people invest? Because they don't have the financial education that will tell them how to attach value to the asset. So the fear of loss from paying too much, because if you pay too much and borrow too much, there's nothing anyone can do for you. So if you buy it right, by buying it right, it means you've got to know what it's worth so you can pay less than what it's worth. I mean, this is the way investing works. You want to buy something below its normal value, and then you add value to it, increase its value, and make it more valuable, and the gap is your profit. So we're making this transition from the industrial age where we exchange labor for money to the information age where you exchange ideas for money. You make money with your mind. Money is created. Wealth is built over time. Money is created. You create it with a thought or an idea, and you go implement it. It's not exchanging labor for money. It's exchanging ideas, thoughts for money. It's a whole new era we're going into. So this is what we've been talking about. So this is what the Real Estate Business School, the company my wife and I have owned for 35 years now. This is what we teach. How to get the license, how to use it. The most important part, how to use it. There are thousands of people enter the business every year. Many never learn how to use the license to provide valuable service with the business education and build a business that works better so they work less. I'm constantly harping about this. More with less, more with less, more with less. And then to invest your profits. So that's the three-step success system that we teach. Get your license, build your business, invest your profits. Take advantage, legal, moral, ethical advantage of the information that we have. That information is MLS. We join it when we become licensees, and that's what I mean by insider trading is legal. The last thing you want to do is break the law, okay? Let me just put it to you this way. The last thing you want to do is be dancing for your cellmate. So don't break the law. But we have this information. Why not use it? It's not your fault. It's not my fault. Look at this. I don't know if you can see the background. This is the house that we live in. The people that bought this house decided they were going to improve it. They over-improved it. They had no budget. They had no sense. They ran out of money. They got in a cat fight, got divorced, and gave it back to the bank. That's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. They put it in MLS. We saw it. We liked it. We bought it. We live in it now. Now we're going to sell it because we're going to take our profits and go do something else. So these properties are in MLS. I'm doing my best to tell you this right now. So if you're doing listings, and I'm suggesting you do at least you want to get rich in real estate, three listing presentations a week, no matter what. Just do 3 a week every week. You'll have a constant stream of buyers and sellers. Okay, so that's who we are. That's what we teach. That's why we teach it. Why do we teach it? Because, let me ask you this. How many of you ever have the feeling there might be more to your life than just earning a living, just making money? Okay, good. How many think there might be something else that you're supposed to be doing? Okay, good. So the thing is, once you get money handled, if you become a master of time and money, and very few people do master those two subjects, you can get on with your life's purpose. You can get on, once you get money handled, you can go do what you're supposed to be doing. So that's why we teach these things. Technical education, business education, financial education. Get it handled so you're not a slave. You can go out and do what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? Okay. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being open-minded, and thank you for listening. I'm going to go into a quick recap. What we've been studying, this is probably going to be, for a while, our last chapter on critical path. So just to recap, what we've been studying is Bucky Fuller. He wrote this book in 1980s, early 80s, just before he died. And what we're talking about is patterns and trends. And Bucky was known, he has more accolades after his name than any American in history, yet surprisingly few people have heard of him. And what Bucky did, I'm surprised actually he wasn't killed, because really I am. He said some really wild and dangerous and provocative things. Provocable, not the sexual provocative, the in-your-face provocative. But he said, if we're going to make it, we got to get rid of politics and religion. I'm like, whoa, Bucky, take it easy. It's really amazing he died a natural death. But he was so far into the future. One of his accolades was that he was a futurist. And he looked so far into the future that most people just wrote him off as a lunatic. So they thought he was just a harmless old fool doddering around. So what we're discovering now is that of all his prognostications, he made 50 predictions, 48 have come true. And the only reason the other 2 have not come true is not enough time has gone by yet. So what we're doing is we're getting a glimpse into the mind of one of the greatest thinkers, greatest intellectual geniuses of the 20th century. I mean, he writes in a rather difficult manner, but I've been studying him for years. I've applied some of his principles that I'm aware of to my life, and all I can tell you is personally, it's opened my eyes and opened my mind, and I've gotten great value out of studying this man and what he was about and what he was teaching. So we're talking about patterns and trends. 1980s, the book was written. Now it's 2020. Let's see how good Bucky was at looking into the future. So I'm going to start with this. We left off last week, right after World War II, we were going over the history of FDR, the New Deal, how the Wall Street lawyers took control of the financial system, took the assets that belonged to the government, that belonged to the American people, made a declaration that America is not supposed to be socialist, the government's not supposed to own anything. So they took all the assets that belonged to the American people and gave them to private enterprise. And the taxpayers are still paying taxes and subsidizing private enterprise to this day. Then they convinced them how to get the gold back, and they created a thing called foreign aid, and they made a law that any foreign aid that was given to a foreign country, a portion of it had to be spent on American corporations if they were in that country. So the American corporations moved to that country. They said first the Fortune 100, then the Fortune 500, then the Fortune 1000, set up offices offshore in other countries so they could get paid, and most of it was in gold, and that's where the gold is. So I told you I would answer these questions. Where's our gold? Who has it? What happened to it? So that was the New Deal. And now we're transitioning from a physical environment, the industrial age, where, as I said before, we exchange labor for money, into this whole new era. If you haven't read A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink, please read it. It may give you some, I think you'll enjoy it if you like studying patterns and trends and see if you can figure out what's coming down the pipe. So the further you can see into the past, the further we can see into the future. That's why I enjoy studying history. And that's what this book is about. So that's where we left off, about talking about invisible power structures. So I thought that this was timely. I've covered this before, but just briefly I'm going to cover this little part again, and then we'll pick up where we left off last week, and then we'll wrap up today with this part, okay? So I'm on page XXIV, 34 in Roman numerals. It's in the intro of Critical Path. So he's talking about wealth. And what Bucky's definition of wealth is please write this down, okay? Please write this down. If you don't have notes, get a notepad and a pen. Quickly, grab a notepad and a pen. Please write this down. Wealth is the ability to survive blank days into the future. Ability to survive, the ability to survive. So there's a difference between money and wealth. What we're taught is be good, do as you're told, make good grades, get a good job, work hard for money. But we're never taught to create wealth. So I'm talking about wealth right now. And Bucky's definition is the huge difference between money and wealth. We're taught to go make money, earn your living. We don't. Bucky says you don't have to earn a living. You have to earn a right to be here. You arrived here with a gift, something valuable to offer your fellow human beings. But we're taught to sell our body, mind, and spirit for a paycheck. Go get a job, earn the right to be here. And what Bucky says, if you do what you're supposed to be doing, the universe will take care of you. Most people believe there's a God or a great spirit or greater intellect governing things, but they don't trust. So they sell out, get a good job, work for money, and toil away. Struggle earning a living. So what I'm suggesting to you, ladies and gentlemen, Linda and I jumped off the cliff in 1989 with no physical evidence of support. And we've been living like that most of our lives now. So it's not about making money, it's about who you have to become. Yeah? So wealth, ability to survive, draw blank, days into the future. Here are the criteria. Number one, if you stop working for money today, you can no longer, from this day forward, ever work for money again the rest of your life. So this is condition number one of 3 conditions. Stop working for money today. Number 2, do not sell any of your assets. We'll go into it later if you hang around and watch. Most of the stuff that you own, that you call assets, that you downloaded, if you download these financial statements, your P&L, your balance sheet, your cash flow statement, and you look at your balance sheet, it's got assets and liabilities and net worth on it. Look at those so-called assets. You know, they're not assets, they're liabilities. I know we've been lied to, you've been told they're assets, but an asset feeds you and a liability eats you. So look at everything on your balance sheet and judge for yourself. Does your furniture eat you or feed you? Does your house eat you or feed you? Does your car eat you or feed you? Does your jewelry eat you or feed you? Do your jet skis eat you or feed you? Does your boat eat you or feed you? So if it eats you, it's a liability. If it feeds you, it's an asset. So go look at your financials and get them figured out. Take all that stuff off that's not an asset. It's not assets. If they don't feed you by putting money in your pocket, they're a liability. So we'll go into this later if you want. It's the next session. This session isn't about that. It's simply getting clear on the definition of wealth so I can tell you about this next piece that Bucky was writing about, okay? Okay. So wealth is the ability to survive X number of days into the future. Condition number 1, you can no longer work for money. Condition number 2, you can't sell off all those assets that you acquired. You can't convert anything you own to cash. Okay? Third one, you cannot lower your standard of living. You cannot lower your standard of living. You can't move out of your mansion into a condo or out of your condo under the bridge. You'd be out there in the overpass with all these other guys. Hey, scoot over. No. You're encroaching. No, I'm not. I was here first. Going to the overpass, they're full of tents nowadays. So if you stop working for money today, you didn't sell off any assets, you didn't lower your standard of living, how many days into the future could you survive financially? You write the number in the blank. That's your wealth. That's your education system for you. If you don't know your number, or you know your number and don't like it, then stick around, because we're going to go into how to create wealth. You create wealth. You build wealth. It's a choice. You choose to be rich. You're not a victim. So this is what Bucky's talking about in terms of wealth. I'm going to go back to his introduction. So we're coming into 80s. We've had computers for a couple decades now. They came out in the mid-50s. He's talking about computing power. The computers are phenomenal machines. They can outperform a human brain X-fold. And they can compute so much information. It's so fast and come up with better answers in less time. So he's talking about how do you solve some of the world's biggest problems. If you could take all the variables and feed them into a computer, the computer would give you an answer. It'd be fairly reliable. So I'm picking up on this, and he says the computer will show that in treating many of the more immediate, most important survival problems, each question will be programmed in the computer asking which way society will experience the lowest cost optimum living by giving all humans handsome fellowships with an income adequate for a high standard of living, or by having them go on earning their livings. So he's talking about paying people to stay home. The computer will show that 70% of all jobs in America are preoccupied with work that is not producing any wealth or life support. So are there different forms of wealth? Yeah, your physical health is obviously a form of wealth, because the more physically fit you are, the longer you're going to survive into the future. Is your mental health a form of wealth? Of course, because it's proven statistic that people who are mentally healthy live longer than people who are not. Are your relationships around you, people who love you, support you, and are around you, and so there's 5 areas of life that I work on. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and financial. It's not about the money. For me, it's just I love money because when I have money, I get to buy my time back. Then I get to go do what I want. It's the most important thing you can buy is your time. If you don't have money, the problem with being broke is it takes up so much of your time. I know, because I've been broke. So I'm going to say it again. The problem with being broke, it takes up so much of your time. And when you have more money than you need, you can buy your time back. So there are different forms of wealth. Part of it is spiritual, part of it's emotional, part of it's physical, part of it's mental, and part of it's financial. Right now, I'm talking about the financial aspect. And so how many days into the future could you survive financially if you stopped working, didn't sell off any of your assets, and didn't lower your standard of living? If you want to increase your numbers, stick around. We'll tell you what to do. So Bucky's talking about wealth, and these jobs, 70% of the jobs in America that don't produce any wealth or add to life support. He says we have inspectors inspecting inspectors, and managers managing managers, and re-underwriters insuring re-undersurers, and supervisors supervising supervisors. All this work is being done, but none of it creates any wealth. It doesn't give us the ability to survive further into the future. So then he talks about taking, the computer will also have identified the findings of the brilliant Denver, Colorado oil geologist, Francois de Chardonnay. I don't know, I don't speak French. So that's fairly close. The economic findings of the length of time it took nature to photosynthetically produce a gallon of gasoline, which is consumed by the all people going to work. The jobs don't create any wealth. So here we have these cars with horsepower in them. And horsepower is determined when we're transitioning from the agrarian age into the industrial age, and we went from horses to engines. And the way they measured the power of output of an engine was by measuring it by horsepower. You could take 1 horse, or you could have an engine that's equal to 50 horses, or 100 horses, or today, several hundred horses. It's about 500 foot-pounds of energy per second is on 1 horsepower. 550 foot-pounds of energy per second is equal to 1 horse. And we have all these cars with 200, 300, 400 horsepowers, or horses under the hood, going back and forth to work, sitting in traffic, sitting at red lights. All these horses jumping up and down, going nowhere, burning all this fuel at the rate of $1 million a gallon, going off to jobs that don't add any wealth. And then he goes on to say, it'd be cheaper to pay him to stay home. What? Cheaper to pay tens of millions of people to stay home? Pay people to stay? That'll never happen. Welcome to 2020. You pay people to stay at home. Now I have a question for you. What happens? This Chinese coronavirus pandemic is going to end. When it ends, what's going to happen? Can you see yourself going back to life? If you're a commuter and you've been commuting, are you anxious to go back to that? I know a lot of people that aren't. What happens to the office buildings? What's happening right now? So what I'm talking about when I talk about patterns and trends, this is why I read this stuff. I don't know if I shared this with you, but I went broke in 1985. I moved to Austin to start over. I was down $2 million, divorced, and a mess. So what I decided to do is clean it up and figure out what I did wrong and what I could do better. So I'm telling you, when I say it's not about making money, it's about who you have to become. I'm just talking to myself. You just happen to be listening. So the way I can keep that from happening again is I look at patterns and trends. What happened? Because what happened to me in 1985 has happened twice since. But I didn't get caught the second and third time. So to me, that's the value of looking into the past. It gives me some indications of what's happening right now, and I can look into the future. So what are the patterns and trends right now? Well, we've got 48 hotels we know that are going back today to a lender. We've got several on the chopping block. Several projects have been put on pause. I just saw today that 20 million credit cards have been frozen. Their account balances, their credit limits have been reduced. So Americans owe about $1.5 trillion on credit card, $1.5 trillion on student debt. And by the way, the government's printing money like no tomorrow. They borrowed $3 trillion. They're about to borrow 3 more. But you know what? That's a P&L item. What's on the balance sheet? It's over $100 trillion. It's not $6 trillion. We take in $1.2 trillion a year in taxes. And that balance sheet, that long-term debt, it's $100 trillion plus. Right now, there's over 2.7 million square feet of subleased commercial space in Austin. What does that mean? Sublease? It means the original tenant blew out and they're trying to lease it to somebody else. Well, who? So all I'm saying is these are patterns and these are trends. And no matter which way the economy goes, it's always a good time to make money. If you understand how to know and read patterns and trends. If you have a technical, a business, and a financial education, you don't get all emotional and embroiled by the stock market and the waves and the screaming and the yelling. You just remain calm throughout the chaos and go do your deals. Because they're out there. So this is what Bucky is saying. Cheaper? It'd be cheaper to pay him to stay home. What? Well, paying people to stay home. So this is the pattern or a trend. By itself, I just ask myself, I see this and I ask myself, is that a pattern or an aberration? Is that a one-off incident or is it one in a series of incidents? And can I get close to predicting the next incident? Can I figure out what's probably going to happen next? And that's why I study history. That's why we're going into this. So I go into this quickly. We'll see if we can make some sense of this. So he's talking about the post-Eisenhower era. It becomes most suitably identified as that of lawyer capitalism. Because I said the lawyers, Wall Street lawyers, took over the corporations. They stripped all the assets from the government. They gave them to free enterprise, to the major corporations. Then they helped them move offshore, all underwritten by the U.S. taxpayers. So he's talking about the atomic development the whole of atomic development was know-how. So when you talk about leverage, you're doing more with less. Your highest form of leverage is education. Because the more you know, the more you can do with less. What I'm talking about is I see everybody as an investor. You're all investors. We get up in the morning and we spend time, energy, and money. All of us do. Time, energy, money. But do we ever count what we put it into and what comes back out of it? So when I say we're all investors and that's how I see everybody, that's how I see the world. So I'm very conscious of how I spend my time, how I spend my money, and what I put my energy into. And I demand a return. I want a return. I don't do it for... If I'm just laying around recharging my batteries, that's fine. That's part of life. I need to do that from time to time. We all do. Humans have to rest. But when you're using time, energy, and money, are you calculating your return? Is there something you do at night that looks at what you did that day and measures it day to day, week to week, year to year? Okay, just throwing that out there. So what I'm saying is, the more you know, the more you can do with less. I can take the same amount of time and I tell you what, my wife is the most incredible doer ever. She'll get more done in a day than most 5 people do in a week. She just gets it done. It's extremely productive. So it's how do you take time, energy, and money and use them to the most to get the maximum benefit back. And what he's saying is the whole of atomic development was know-how. Scientists had the know-how, and anybody with their technical information could not even speak their language. Anybody without their technical information could not even speak their language. The know-how club, monopolized by lawyer capitalism, was a very tight club. Furthermore, the non-member 4 billion plus human beings on planet. So what he's talking about here is that 1980 there were 4 billion billionaires on the planet. We were all billionaires in waiting. We just had not been able to access it because it was held by lawyers and corporations. The know-how club, monopolized by your lawyer capitalism, was a very tight club. Large private enterprise had now hired all the know-how scientists and engineers. They seemingly could keep the public out of their affairs forever. The world power structures had the U.S. government completely emasculate the Bureau of Standards. There was an earnest and concerned battle by a few responsible scientists to keep the Bureau intact, but they were overwhelmed. Henceforth, all science must be done by private corporations themselves or under their subsidized university, college, private laboratory work. So they converted all the colleges and universities work there and committed that to give that to private enterprise. To appreciate the extent of this know-how monopoly of big corporations, one need only look over the wording of the scientists and engineering help-wanted advertisements of the big corporations in the many pages of the New York Times Sunday business section or their counterpart publications in other big cities. The invisible esoteric world of today's science, in the invisible esoteric world of today's science, there is no way for the American government or public without the USA Bureaus of Standards scientists to follow the closely held technical secrets of the big profit-oriented corporations. To a small extent, such popular journals as Scientific American help people follow details of this and that special case science without learning of the significance of the information in respect to the comprehensive evolution. So it goes on to talk about the atomic age and how we're coming into it. He says, no economic accounting books list metaphysical assets. So we grow up, humans, what I understand him saying here, humans are very sensorial creatures. We're taking information through our senses. So it's sight, right? It's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, olfactory. So we're taking information through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our feeling, and visual, eyes, auditory, ears, kinesthetic, feeling, taste, which is gustatory, and smell, which is olfactory. If we don't smell it, see it, touch it, for us it doesn't represent real. What represents reality to us is what we can see, touch, feel. Bucky goes on to say, the problem with that is 99.9% of the universe is invisible. So what you can see and touch and feel and hear is only 1/10 of 1% of what's out there. Metaphysics. No accounting books list metaphysical assets. Metaphysics is held to be insubstantial, meaning in Latin, nothing on which to stand. Patents can be granted only for special cases. In other words, limited physical practice applications of abstract generalized principles. Generalized principles, what Bucky says, is something is true in all cases. He didn't deal in theory or fad. He set out to discover the laws of nature and how to apply them. What are the laws? What are the physics? What are the generalized principles? Like gravity. He said gravity is a generalized principle. If you don't understand gravity, step off the roof. You'll understand it. As you're falling to the ground, you will understand gravity. So he says the limited physical practice applications of abstract and generalized principles, which principles alone are inherently metaphysical and unpatentable. So the invisible principles like gravity is unpatentable and not invented, but physical patents are capital. So he goes on to say we have two fundamental realities in our universe, the physical and the metaphysical. So I'm suggesting to you right now, this is what's wiping out the middle class. It's the invisible. It's the metaphysical. So we're doing so much more. So they're being replaced by robots and supercomputers. These mundane, repetitive tasks are being done by computers and robots. It started decades ago. It's in acceleration mode now. This COVID pandemic has forced us all into a direction we were already headed in. So it's accelerating. Acceleration is what I'm seeing, because I don't think we're going to have this rubber band snapback effect. We're not going back. The future is not an extension of the present. We're going into a whole new era. And we're doing so much more with so much less. We don't need humans to do it anymore. Even lawyers are being replaced. Doctors are being replaced. Most lawsuits are settled in court. That's done by researchers. You don't need floors and floors and floors of office space full of researchers. You just get a computer and find a few geeks to run them. Same with doctors and prescriptions. Prescriptions are a wholesale product. The problem is that they're customized. They need to be customized. Just like education. If you're a teacher out there, you know what I'm talking about. Our education system is an assembly line, one size fits all education system. What you know if you're teaching is that everybody has individual learning skills. So it's a customized product that's been delivered wholesale, mass produced. So what's happening is we have these technologies that allow doctors to prescribe a medication faster and more accurately than a doctor ever can, because there's so many variables and so many things to know. But a computer can figure that out. And that's the direction we've been leaning in, and now we're in it. We're in the digital age. So what he's saying, we have two fundamental realities, physical and metaphysical. Physicists identify all the physical phenomena as the exclusive manifest of energy. Energy associative as matter, or disassociative as electromagnetic behavior or radiation. Both of these energy states are reconvertible one into the other. Because there is no experimental evidence of energy being created or lost, there is no physical evidence of energy being created or destroyed or lost. World scientists and philosophers now concede it to be evidence the universe is eternally regenerative. The universe regenerates. It's regenerative. Look, there's no such thing as scarcity. It only exists in people's minds. I know we've got Malthusian economics, supply, demand, price. And if you look at Malthus and Malthusian economics, then you can see in the definition, allocation of scarce resources. But there's no such thing as scarcity. It only exists in people's minds. So let me ask you this. Why do we pay our farmers not grow food? We got millions of people dying of starvation every year, and we're paying our farmers to keep the crops out of circulation, to prop up the price. That's why they do it. So it goes on and on about the atomic age and how we got into atomic age. How the Japan, after atomic age, we had all this metal deposited in the Orient and in Japan and in Southeast Asia. And they took all that metal. They didn't need mines filled with ore. We left the metal behind, and they took it and repurposed it. So we destroyed the factories in Europe. We destroyed the factories in Japan and Asia, and we refinanced the building of those factories, but the U.S. did not rebuild the factories. They just set about making more money. So then he goes on to talk about the big oil companies. The big oil companies knew long ago, that humanity, the big oil companies knew long ago that humanity would ultimately run out of an adequate supply of petroleum and other fossil fuels, though coal may last 1,000 years. That's why, by the means we have reviewed, the oil companies acquired control of the know-how on atomic energy, as well as all the atomic plants and equipment paid for originally by the USA government. The power structure's only interest is in selling energy, and only energy that can run through a meter. They're not in the least interested in anyone getting wind power except themselves. Very rich men having their sailing yachts wind-driven to Europe or the South Seas, but this is not for the people. people's power must be piped or wired to them only through meters. He said, this is why we don't have wind power. This is why we don't have solar, because they haven't figured out a way to stick a meter between you and the sun. Once they figure that out, you'll have solar. We have more energy coming into the plant every day than we need. If you've ever been on the beach, you see it. These waves rolling in, so you could harness that energy. We do it now with dams. We just build a big dam. We dam it with water. We let it run through. We take that power. The power's already here. So we're talking about 1972, the power structure capital had converted its dollars into gold, oil, or early highly concentrated mobile equities. President Nixon severed the USA dollar from the government guaranteed gold equity. So he took us off the gold standard. 1972, second time it had been done. And the buying power plummeted. Now, he says in 1980, being worth only 5 cents of the 1971 USA dollar. By 1974, much of the world's buying power landed in the laps of the Arabs, who sat on top of the cheap petroleum source in the world. So he says, suddenly, the Arabs discovered they'd been sitting on this gold, this oil, for thousands of years. And it suddenly became apparent in the mid-70s. So what they lacked was they had wealth, but they didn't know how to tap into it. They didn't have the technology know-how. So the Saudi Arabian king went to the American bankers and said, my banks don't know anything about international banking or major industrial accommodation. So our bank said, how would you like for us to run your banks and get your oil out? So they did that. And OPEC was established. The great oil companies controlled it all. In general, they and non-communist Arabia are one and the same. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC officialdom, regardless of national political differences, is run entirely by the oil companies' trillions of dollars of persuasiveness. So this is when we took over the oil, and then the oil companies got into the atomic energy business. And then but they didn't count on earthquakes or other natural disasters that may happen. So then 3 Mile Island blew up and everybody became anti-atomic energy because two problems. First of all, it was dangerous. They couldn't control it. Second of all, they didn't know how to do to store the nuclear waste has a 10,000-year shelf life. And they don't know how to store it. So I don't know if you've been following this, but they've got this huge storage depot they built in Nevada because Nevada was allegedly safe from earthquakes. It's got these, 15 or 20 foot concrete walls. It's all this huge caverns, and they're pulling all the nuclear waste in it. They're about to get the thing finished, and it had an earthquake and cracked it. So now they don't know where to store it. They had 3 Mile Island incident. American public turned against atomic energy. So the second great gasoline pinch of June 79 was put upon the public by the invisible energy know-how cartel to painfully divert the public concern generated by 3 Mile Island radiation accident and the threat of a reactor meltdown. Though the public had reacted strongly against atomic plants, the sudden energy supply squeeze administered by the oil companies made the general public so energy hungry again that it stopped for the moment listening to those who were attempting to curtail atomic energy plants. The, quote, gas crisis reestablished rational public yielding to the government support of atomic energy as the answer to the energy crisis. Today, in 1980, world power structure struggle is one of the USSR and big capitalism, which you now call lawyer capitalism, which deliberately took the world's private enterprise corporations out of the fundamental jurisdiction of America. They have kept their USA operations going in seemingly normal way, so people in the U.S. haven't realized that these companies are officially situated elsewhere despite the incredible amplification of those great corporations' annual profits, whose annual totals payable to the corporation stockholders are the same magnitude as the annual increase in USA's joint internal and external debt increases. America is utterly bankrupt externally in terms of balance of trade due to its own oil companies now operating as Arabian business. The national debt at the time of the New Deal was $33 billion, which is nothing today, which was the cost of the debt, which was the cost of World War I. Before World War I, we frequently had no national debt whatever. We have today a national debt, this is back in 1980, that exceeds $800 billion. Today it's $100 trillion. 30% of that indebtedness comes from underwriting of ever longer term mortgages. In 1934, the USA underwrote a completely obsolete building industry while Eisenhower allowed the banking world to make an incredible amount of money in interest rates and services in support of the building of the real estate game, which building industry, if it were any good, would pay the USA back handsomely. The USA cannot even pay the annual interest on its $800 billion national debt. We're not even paying the interest on the debt today. This is why the Nixon presidency and all those who have had to enter each year with a negative budget, acknowledging at year's end the USA will have more debt and go deeper into debt. Our foreign trade balance indebtedness as of September 1979 was $104 billion. So now we look and see, how is Bucky doing at prognosticating? How is he doing at looking into the future? Look at the mortgage crisis between 1980 and today. We've had two. The S&L crisis in the 80s when the savings and loans melted down because the lenders were taking risky investments, participating in their own deals, not as lenders but as partners. And when they all crashed, the taxpayers picked up the tab via the RTC, Resolution Trust Corporation. We bailed them out. And we did it again in 2008 when they once again started calling all those subprime mortgages because they rated those. Moody's and the linchpin in any real estate transaction is the appraisal. The appraisal. If the property doesn't appraise, it doesn't go to closing unless the seller reduces the price or the buyer brings more cash. Moody's Investors and those other agencies that rated debt are the linchpin. They're the appraiser in the deal. And they labeled all those tranches, all those stocks, all those securities backed by American real estate, which typically is safe. Over long term, it's one of the safest investments in the world. That's why investors around the world invest in our real estate, because typically it goes up over time and it's low risk, pretty good return. They rated all that junk AAA and they sold them around the world. And they stole trillions of dollars from people around the world. So that was caused a meltdown. So it's happened twice. Get ready. So this is what he's saying. None of this was the American people's doing. It was all done in absolutely legal but utterly invisible manner by lawyer capitalism. Individual bankers, industrial corporation officers, and the rest have had to do what their lawyers told them to do. No bad people have been involved. The lawyers were following their survival instinct and doing so completely legally. So he says in closing, if we take the billions of dollars given in the 1930s to the great USA Defense Industries corporations by the New Deal's Reconstruction Finance Corporation, if we take the hidden tax deduction subsidies to do research, development, and advertising given to all these companies in pre-1942 dollars, if we take the $100 billion in foreign aid that we paid for the overseas establishment of our great corporations, if we take the $155 billion of atomic know-how development taken over by the companies, he's talking about it cost about $155 billion to develop the atomic bomb, and we gave it to free enterprise. It belonged to the people. It belonged to the government. It now belongs to private enterprise. And if we take the number of fine ounces of gold bullion taken out of America exclusively by the capitalist world banking system, And if we take a reasonably low estimate of the unknown billions of dollars taken out of the USA by the CIA to operate exclusively on behalf of international capitalism without the knowledge or authority of the people of the U.S., of the USA's quasi-democracy, and if we multiply the sum of foregoing figures by 25, which is the amount to which our present USA dollars have depreciated between the time of the appropriation and January 1, 1980, these are 1980 numbers. We come to a figure in the magnitude of $6 trillion that has been legally transferred from the USA People's National Capital Account over to the capital ownership account of the stockholders of the largest 1,000 transnational, exclusively American flag-flying corporations. They gave it all away. Everything we have reported here, he's saying here, everything we have reported here has been published at one time or another, with the individual items often so far apart from the last relevant item that the public has tended to not remember or associate the items. I'm going to read that again. Everything we have reported here. So Bucky was religiously fanatical. He had access to all this information. He kept the statistics for 50 years. He said, I've got all the stats. I've got the numbers. I can prove everything I say. Everything we have reported here has been published at one time or another. But with the individual items so far apart from the last relevant item that the public has tended to not remember and associate the items. As a consequence, the total picture presented here is approximately unknown to any but the Wall Street's lawyers, grand strategists, and most of whom are no longer alive. That's it. So I'll finish with this. Cosmic accounting completely eliminates the economic validity of bankruptcy accounting, except when humans make the mistake of trying to hoard or withdraw critical capital assets from production functioning. Withdrawal of capital assets is akin to attempting to withdraw one of the stars from the celestial system. Into what universe, other than the cosmic totality, may the star be transferred? So he's talking about every atom and electron is essential, and every part of the eternal universe is eternally regenerative. Therefore, in other words, totally inexhaustible. So now he goes on to say, this is how, if we decide, it's either going to be utopia or oblivion. And humans have the ability to decide. But now he says the truth becomes more important than ever. Are you going to go along with your mind, or are you going to go along with the crowd? The integrity is the essence of everything. It's the integrity to tell the truth. Again, are you going to go along with your mind, what you know is the truth, or are you going to go along with the crowd? The problem with the crowd is the crowd's usually wrong. So I hope that gives you something to think about. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying Bucky's right. But it's an interesting conversation to have. Next week, we're going to the 7 steps. What it takes to create, build, and run your own business. So if you decide to take the leap, you want really true freedom, then to me, the way to do that, by being a business owner. So what are the 7 steps? We'll go through them next week. Wednesdays with Wayne, 9 to 10, brought by our buddies over at Facebook. Can't believe they do this for nothing. So thank you for, once again, to Facebook for allowing us to be on and do this. I hope this gets through the censors. the CENSORS. And by the Real Estate Business School. Those are our sponsors. Business School, Real Estate Business School, where you get your license and learn to use it. This has been the learn to use it part. How do you use a real estate license? How do you build a business that works so you don't have to? How do you build a business that adds value? How do you put a team together? Business is the ultimate team sport. And we're going to talk about how to play the game next week. We'll start with the foundational nuts and bolts. Big picture overall. What is a business about? What are the 7 steps required to find and build a business? How do you get this whole thing started? So we're going to talk about that next week. I'll end the way I started. Thank you for your time. As always, as I said, a friend of mine told me years ago, so the most valuable thing anyone can give you is their time. So thank you for your time. Hope you found it well spent. I'm going to sign off. This is Wednesdays with Wayne. Every Wednesday from 9 to 10. Thank you for what you do. Have a great day. Let's go out and make it a better world. Thank you for your time.